Hi, I'm Mal from the Money Study, bringing you another episode in our Take 10 challenge. You've made it through 50 days and we're up to your first share purchase. So this is where we see what we can and can't do when we come to buy our shares for the first time. So there's my disclaimer, facts and figures, information only, not advice. If we're starting out and we're looking to buy some shares or so forth, then every time, as we said in the previous episode, we buy and sell shares, we're up for this brokerage fee. And of course, the fee can indeed be quite an important component of what we're trying to do. And of course, so therefore, the less we invest, so the smaller our account, then the greater these fees are as a percentage of our investment. Because you see, if our brokerage costs were, say, $20, I mean, a lot of them do have this 1995 business, but if it was, say, $20 and you only buy $600 worth of shares, then that brokerage cost is going to represent 3.3% of your investment. So this thing's got to make over 3.5%, 3 and a bit percent nearly, just to get you back to your starting point. Now, so obviously the same price on a $5,000 worth of shares, it's only 0.4, so we're not losing so much there. So you can see there why in the previous session I was quite happy when people like CMC Markets offer you to be able to buy $1,000 worth of shares and indeed pay no brokerage on Australian shares, because that's certainly a significant impost, a bit of a hurdle to get over. And so if you start with a small amount of money, the company you invest in may have to perform far above the average just due to break costs, and let alone turn a profit. So just keep in mind that brokerage cost. Now, what I usually try and suggest you do here is, look, don't get too stressed, about our first several placements and purchases. You've really got to treat them as education. So if we do buy something that really doesn't end up working out how we would have liked, then so long as obviously we didn't lose a hell of a lot of money, then probably it was cheap education to say, well, I won't do that again, depending on what was the reason. What was your reasoning to buy in the first place? Was it sensible? Now, of course, you can have all the greatest ideas in the world and you can do everything correctly and still lose money. That's dead right. But after analysing it, you could say, well, okay, perhaps I just jumped in a bit too soon here, or I jumped in far too late. Everybody was telling me I needed to buy this thing when basically it had already done its thing. So just a case of, look, the first few trades, I would strongly suggest, if you've never done it before, start small, find out how it all works, get comfortable, see what the runs are on the board, so that we can really just treat it as I say, education. You've got to treat your investing a little bit like a business and like a profession. And any other profession, you've got to go to school, you've got to do some courses, you've got to spend some time on it, you've got to put effort into it, and probably spend some money for your education. So trading in shares is really absolutely no different. It's just so long as in those early days we don't lose too much, because what we don't want to do is to lose all the money you've got available. That would be really dumb, because then we can't go to step two. But B, if it scares you too much, then you just might have that fear factor. Even though you've got some money, you go, oh, I just lost $5,000 and that really hurt. Well, no, we don't want to be scared off continuing on, unless, of course, we just don't have a clue what we're doing. That's really what it comes down to. But look, most brokers will require that the first trade be at least $500. So $500 is effectively the minimum share trade that you can do. So you could buy $500 worth of whatever company it may be. And of course, depending on their share price, if the share's only $1 each, we can get 500 shares. If the share price is $500, we can only buy one share, and so it goes on. But generally speaking, $500 is the minimum amount. And so ideally, of course, if we're trying to get our bit of diversification up, then ideally we've probably got 2,500. I mean, the ASX at the bottom there suggests that you should start with at least $2,000 as a guide. And so probably what they're suggesting there is the fact that if you've got $500 as a minimum, with $2,000, you could indeed be buying 4 different shares to give you perhaps a little bit of diversification, a bit of spreading there of your first few investments so that you can sort of see how things are working and how things go and so forth. So now, of course, if you did buy $500 worth, obviously it's not a huge amount of money or a huge number of shares. Could be a lot of money to some people, but I say as far as shares concerned, it's a small parcel of shares. If you then want to add to them, so you can then add some more. So you've bought the first 500, you go, well, that's working well. I wouldn't mind to put a bit more money with that same share. Then the size of increments and how many shares you have to buy can indeed come down to the individual broker. So if you've already got $500 worth, you may find that you can actually buy your next parcel of shares might only be $100 worth, that they may not make that minimum amount of 500, literally because of the paperwork. Once you've got that extra 100, then it's really no more difficult for them to report. But if they've got to report on a totally different share, then they'll make you literally have the $500 minimum all over again. But again, it comes down to the broker. Some brokers will charge you a minimum of 500 whether you are buying a new share or just adding to what you've already got. So do a bit of homework if you really believe that you would be adding to something in increments less than, say, $500 there. Now, we're going to purchase, but what are the things we've really got to think about before we even buy it? We're going to buy this thing, but I always recommend that the thing that you really should get into your head is if you buy something, doesn't matter what it is, what is going to be your trigger to sell it? See, people get so excited. They get so excited about buying something, but they have no plan in place as to when am I wrong? When am I going to get rid of this thing? They don't think of the downside and what indeed would be that trigger. Now, is it the fact that if the price goes down by 20%, if I lose half my money, would you indeed want to sell it? And you see, if you can figure out what would be the trigger to sell, then you can figure out how much you're going to spend. You see, if you thought that I've got $500 here, but if I lose more than $250, then that's it, and I'll sort of never do it again or whatever. Then you sort of know that that obviously you can't spend more than your $500 and lose more than half of that particular share. You get the idea that if you've lose 20%, then 20% of your 500 is only losing $100, and so it goes on. So if you can figure out what you're comfortable in losing before you would get rid of it, then you can work out really how many you can buy, how much are you indeed going to spend. So it's a case of looking at the worst scenario first, looking at what would be the dollar amount that you'd say, that's it, I've had enough, and you want to get out. What is that perhaps? You work backwards either as a percentage or as a dollar amount to work out, how many you're going to buy. Then it comes down to, so you've worked out, what is your pain threshold. You work out what you can afford first. We haven't even figured out what to buy yet. We've just figured out what would be our pain threshold. How much can we've got? And then we go looking, when are we going to be able to do all of this? So is it a case we're going to buy regularly? Are we all going to put it all in one go? Is it a case we're going to be adding to it? And so if we get a bit of an idea of what we are planning to do, And then with all that information, then we go looking for what to buy, because we've got a bit more of an idea. There's not much point spending $500 on a share that moves, by more than 20% in a day, if your pain threshold is only losing $50, because you could lose your money within day one. So if you're looking for something that it's got to fit your parameters, so it's got to be something that doesn't move generally. I mean, the things can always change, but some shares move very little in a day. Other shares are hugely dramatic in a day. And so it comes down to looking at what we're going to lose first, how much we're going to spend. Therefore, then we can work out, does that fit what we're thinking about buying? Now, of course, if you look at the other way around, you look at what you're going to want to buy, then before you do it, then you've got to look at the other parameters to see whether the selling, and how much you can afford fits that particular share. And you may say, well, okay, I want to buy it. This is what I want to buy, but blimey, no, I couldn't afford to lose more than X, and I can only buy this amount, or I need to buy at least that amount, and that's all too painful. Well, forget it. Don't do it. Don't do it. You've got to be comfortable. Otherwise, you'd lose your money in day one, and that'd be the end of the story. Or could lose your money in day one. So we're going to work out what we're going to buy. We've worked out how much we've got, and therefore we can work out the number of shares. So we just literally, this is the amount of money that we're going to spend, and therefore the number of shares. Now, of course, as I say, it comes down to not all company shares are the same price, that's for sure. So we need to work out what we've got, what is the share price, divide it to figure out how many shares we can buy. Most of the platforms, as we're going to find out in future sessions, will allow you to either buy it as a dollar amount or to buy it as a number of shares, whichever way you want to go. Normally I suggest, you see, some people get all excited, they've finally figured out, yep, tomorrow morning, I'm going to go and buy whatever it may be, because I saw last night it was only $7, and yep, I've worked out I'm going to buy this amount of money, this is the amount of shares I'm going to buy, and therefore I'm ready to go. And so they're all excited. 10 o'clock the market opens, they put in their order, but of course everything moves so quickly in the first few minutes. It could be by the time your order is actually placed, the price could have gone up by 15% or down before your trade before it's even placed. Now, there are things we can do to sort of remedy that sort of scenario, but it is a case normally, I would strongly suggest, if you're doing, especially if you're doing it this from your first trade, at least wait until about 10:30 before you do anything, because that first half an hour is the wildest ride, and generally speaking, the last 10 minutes can, before it closes at 4 o'clock, can also be quite can be quite busy. They normally say that the professionals trade in the last 10 minutes, and all the beginners do it in the first half an hour. So I just like to get that wash out of the way to really before I know. So I know that what I'm doing makes sense, because I say you don't want the share price to be moving so quickly on you that all the numbers just don't stack up to what you'd clearly set down the night before to work out. Don't panic on your very first trade. Don't rush it. As I say, wait till things calm down. You calm down, check everything twice, literally just say, okay, I've got that many shares. There's the dollar value. This is exactly the company that I want to buy. All of that. So you look at it twice, 3 times before you actually hit the button to place the trade. Because once you've hit the button to place the trade, your order has gone through the broker to the ASX, they will act upon it. And normally, you'll find that, bang, 20 seconds later, you'll be getting pings on your phone or on your app and so forth to show that you now own that particular share at the price that it went through at. Now, we'll talk about these prices in coming days and so forth, but please check everything twice, calm down, And look, I say, if you've got someone who can hold your hand, someone who's done it before, when you do your first trade, probably not a bad idea. Once you get the first one out of the way, it really is quite simple. It all sounds, with all these different words we're learning and all the different bits and pieces that we've gone through just to get to this point, it can sound awfully daunting. But just imagine we're looking to buy a ETF, Australian market, and we've got $1,000. Well, that's all we need to do. We find the number of the ETF, we put in $1,000, and effectively we can hit the button. So can be simple, but it can be made more difficult depending on if we do anything dumb. Okay, and of course we're always here to help. Look forward to you joining me on another session.